Okay, everyone. My name is Justin Esarey. I'm a professor at Wake Forest University, co-chairing this panel with Peter. I'm going to stop talking in just a second. I want to mention a couple of technical things since I'm running the tech board here. For those in the audience virtually, if you have questions, you can raise your hand and then we can recognize you and we will enable your microphone, allow you to talk to everyone in the audience will be able to hear you. Everyone up here will be able to hear you. You'll be able to hear them. But your default is to be muted for your privacy and just to make sure the panel goes okay. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Siavelis.
All right, thank you, Justin. And also thank you, Justin, for organizing the tech behind this. It's really going to make this a much more effective panel. So I think we all appreciate it. So this is a roundtable on special issue on research with undergraduates. That is most of the articles are already on First View and will appear officially in October. And I wanted to thank everybody present, both our guests and our panelists, for their patience and understanding in understanding our decision to move this to a hybrid format. Justin and I will ask a series of questions to be discussed, answered by the panel for 60 minutes. Some degree of improvisation we hope will take place and some back and forth. And both virtual and in-person panelists will have the opportunity to respond to the questions. Then we'll go ahead and leave the last 30 minutes of the panel open for unstructured Q&A from the audience. But just to begin, I would like us to all introduce ourselves so we know who we are. But we do have limited time, so if you could just sort of limit it to your name, affiliation, that would be great, so we all know who each others are. Let's start with the people sitting at the table. We can start with Joseph and then move to the right, and then we'll do the virtual participants.
Okay, Joseph E., Hanyang University, Seoul, Korea. It's great to see everybody.
Hi, I'm Julia Coyoli. I'm a PhD candidate at Harvard.
Avital Livni, Associate Professor at the University of Illinois.
Kelebogile Zvobgo, Assistant Professor at the College of Women.
All right, and so for our online panelists.
Hey, I'm Paul Dosh.
Paul, we can't hear you. Hold on a second.
Okay.
That may be our problem. Let's see. Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So Paul Dosh, teaching comparative politics at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Great to be with you.
I'm Lisa Mueller. I'm also at Macalester.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Duncan at Purdue University.
And I'm Sarah Dreier at University of New Mexico.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're thrilled that we were able to put this together. Justin and I will just volley back and forth with the questions. So I'll just begin with the first question, and a very basic one that concerns all of us, and that's despite many institutions, including my own, commitment to having faculty members engage in undergraduate research, there's some obstacles to obtaining funding in order to undertake that research. So what are some of the strategies that the panel have used or that can suggest for obtaining funding to engage undergraduates in research? Don't everybody answer at once.
I can start.
Why don't you?
So a lot of universities universities have federal work study, but a lot of people don't know that you can apply federal work study towards undergraduate research experiences. So it's not just that students are working at the library or in the cafeteria, but research can be part of that. And so functionally how that works is that the federal government kicks in 70 cents for every dollar. And so that's like one way to, I guess, stretch scarce resources. Another option is something one of my colleagues and co-authors on this article, Jamie Settle, came up with in our department at William & Mary, is to have a directed research option. And so a faculty member is able to get credits towards their teaching load over, depending on how many students they work with over a given number of semesters. And so for some people, that functionally ends up being their being one of their classes, working with students on research. That's what she does in her social networks and political psychology lab. And then I would say for the last piece, working with having projects with colleagues in different departments or who are, I guess, in different areas of the school. So right now there's an incentive at our institution for social scientists to do research with folks in the humanities. And so being able to figure out what initiatives the college or university is advancing at that particular time, and being able to recast one's work or reorganize it in that way. And yeah, I think they're like, there'll be pots of money in different places, but it does take a lot of, upfront costs to discover where those are, even in an institution where one has been for several years.
Yeah, I'll build off of Kelly's comments a little bit. So most of my undergraduates work for credit. And so that has been, as long as I'm very committed to it being an educational experience for them, not just free labor for me. And so I think that if you're going to go that route, I think take the pedagogy of it more like seriously as an important contribution. I've had some success in getting support from my university, but I'll say that the most important thing there was presenting some evidence of the impact that the work is doing. And so think about maybe building in a little bit of evaluation of your program working with undergraduates in the early stages so that you can have some evidence of impact and bring that to your campus to see about support. And then the last piece, which I think is not very helpful, is I think lead with the research. So get support for your research that includes student hourly support. And so if you can get grant funding for the project that you have your interns, your research assistants working on, that can be valuable. And a lot of federal agencies are really happy to see that undergraduates are getting involved in the project. But you have to have the substance of the project has to be there for them to take a second look at your application.
Do you find that the inclusion will make your grant proposal more attractive?
I mean, my experience with the NSF is yes, because the NSF explicitly has undergraduate involvement in research as one of their priorities. So I don't know if others have had other funding agencies look at this seriously, but I'd say for the NSF, it is a bonus.
Yeah, I'd say internally as well at William & Mary that if you have a research project and you can show that it substantially involves undergraduates, that definitely helps. And some faculty research grants have that as an expectation. And so if this is already how you're organizing and conducting your work, that's definitely a boon. But I know for me, to your point, Avital, leading with projects when I was negotiating my startup and saying I need this many research assistants over this period of time to advance this element of my book project, or to start these papers in this like new stream of research, and basically showing exactly what it's needed for. Yeah, itemization is always good.
Hi, I'd like to add to that as well. One of the things that we've explored is working with our development office on campus. So essentially those folks on campus who help raise funds. So we've had a number of programs that allowed for immersive research experiences that we relied on that group to help us raise money with alumni and families and so on. So that's one option that folks can consider if that's a resource available at their universities. Pi Sigma Alpha, the Honor Society, Political Science Honor Society. Often there are grants available for students, for local chapters, as well as for project students might be conducting research projects. And lastly, I have colleagues, it's not in political science per se, but these colleagues have written grants to local institutions within the city or within the state. And within part of these grants, one of the itemized items, as you mentioned, was working with undergrads on research. And so these are some other areas besides, I guess, maybe some of the traditional pathways that we have used. I know of colleagues who have used and have been successful.
Anyone else, Joseph?
Oh, yes. Hello. My experience in South Korea has been different. The most popular universities are large research universities based in the capital Seoul. And the large research universities are very hierarchical. And professors have structural, legal, and resource constraints. So for example, we can only hire teaching assistants and research assistants who are graduate students. Right, they cannot be undergrads, I asked, because oftentimes my undergrad students spoke better English than graduate students. So so I would have liked, maybe hiring undergrad as a teaching assistant, but they said no. And number two is that because resources are very limited, especially in the social sciences and humanities, the university leadership want you to focus your limited time and resources on helping grad students research and publish. And so because we're having a hard, because most grad students do not publish. They don't have the skills and resources and experience. And so whenever I got research funding, such as doing research on North Korea, I would use grant resources and my time to help graduate students publish their research. And so I can mention this later, but another symptom of that is that we don't have any honors colleges in Korea that would maybe focus on undergrads and push them to research and publish. Okay, and so in South Korea, if students want to research and publish on their own, they would have to actually go outside to the private sector, to after-school academies that focus on, that specialize in helping like maybe high school and undergrad students publish. Students who are kind of outsiders to the Confucian hierarchical system. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. That's really interesting. And part of our mission as the new editors of this journal were really to internationalize the focus of the journal, because it's been very American US focused. And that would be something interesting to the future, to look at some of the international challenges to engaging undergraduate research in systems that are quite different. So thanks for weighing in on that.
Thank you.
If I may, I'd love to chime in with a less practical response to the prompt, which is why I've saved it until other people have offered actual useful advice. So I think of my undergraduates not just as students who might engage in research during the 4 years when I interact with them, but they may become curious in research and then only later really execute the projects that they begin brainstorming in my class or with me one-on-one. And so one of the activities that I've assigned in my empirical research methods class in the past was a mock grant proposal. And so it really is just like a mock exercise. Like there are no stakes. It's not like I'm writing this with a student and we're going to submit it to the NSF or anything like that. It's just, I want to put them in the headspace of an independent researcher who is like pitching their work. And on the most basic level, I've found this to be pretty useful because many students at the undergraduate level are kind of delightfully naive to like the need to raise money to implement many projects. And so like the light bulb kind of goes off like the minute they receive this assignment. And then even though I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it's kind of fair to assume that for many of us applying for research funding is like a huge chore and not a joy. I was really surprised at the fun that the students told me they had on this assignment. I thought it would just be like some dry exercise in kind of mock bureaucracy, but au contraire, like they thought it was kind of cool because I don't really know why, actually. Maybe I need to write an article about this. This was not the point of my article whatsoever. This conversation just kind of reminded me about this assignment. And so like, I don't know if it is kind of putting the cart before the horse, but to think about students 5-10 years after they leave my classroom, having that that assignment under their belt and maybe like using it for a project that doesn't even involve me is something that I've thought about too.
Anyone else on the funding engagement question?
One thing I'll add, and I apologize, I have an infant who's eluding his afternoon nap. So if you hear something in the background, that's why, or that's what's going on. This is not exactly low-hanging fruit, but we have had success gaining grants from outside of NSF. In our case, particularly, we had success with Carnegie, and the framework there was not so much the focus on the research, but the focus on DEI and the fact that we were sort of invested in training a host of, in our case, security-related scholars and policy experts from populations that are, historically excluded. And that, for us, was the venue that we received in order to get funding. Now, of course, in this project, it's equal parts education for our fellowship participants and also undergraduate research. And so I raised that as an alternative with a totally different frame, and it's a big lift from a granting perspective, but that is the sort of more educational alternative to an NSF approach to acquiring funding.
All right, so I'll ask the next question. Obviously, one thing you have to do if you're going to work with undergraduates on research is find undergraduates to work with on research, and ones that are interested, ones that have the right skills, ones that aren't going to get distracted by homecoming or whatever. So how have you solved that problem in your own work?
Okay, so I'd like to hop in because I wanted to piggyback on something that was said before. And forgive me, I forget the name of our colleague from South Korea, but you talked about honors colleges and honors programs. And I think that's fertile ground for question two, right? What is the best way to recruit students? It's very common that honors students have some sort of thesis or research project that is required for their completion of their program. And they are often looking for projects to do or to work on projects with faculty. So those are students who are highly motivated in general. That tends to be the profile. But besides that, highly motivated to get their curriculum completed as well, and might be indeed searching for opportunities to fulfill that. But I also wanted to speak about URM and first-gen students too. And I think when it comes to thinking about recruiting students, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, whereby I think recognizing students and student needs are very important as a first step. Sometimes students lack the confidence or the self-efficacy, right, to approach faculty or to even respond to gestures of or overtures where we invite them to participate. And so mentoring and coaching, I think, becomes very important in that as well. So in terms of practical things that I do in that regard, is sending targeted emails and approaching students after class, inviting them to my office hours where they can even think that, yes, you have the capability, you can do this, you have the potential to engage in research, helping students to overcome this sort of imposter syndrome that we tend to find very common in students from marginalized backgrounds or among women, for instance. So I'll stop here for now and give the floor to someone else.
I can jump in. Before I start on this specific question, my article is co-authored with Paul, who's on Zoom. So we're going to be somewhat awkward in that, like, we're going to try to share talking about this from two different places. But I think Paul and I in our article are talking about, I think, a different way of involving undergrads in research, in that we looked at involving undergraduates in long-term projects that result in a peer-reviewed publication where the undergrad is a co-author. And we were specifically interested in that type of collaboration when there's also fieldwork done together between the faculty member and the co-author or the undergrad. And this is inspired by the fact that that's something that Paul and I did when I was an undergrad at Macalester. So we talked to other faculty at small or selective liberal arts colleges to try to get a sense of how they've made this happen. And what we identified in terms of this specific question about how you recruit students is a lot of this really came from faculty approaching students who had excelled in their class in one way or another and seeing like targetingly reaching out to students to say they wanted to follow up with them. And that in most of these cases, these were collaborations that a faculty member had a specific project and wanted to invite an undergraduate to be a co-author on this project or to start working as a research assistant and to eventually become a co-author. We had though two other kind of ways in which recruitment happened that we thought were really interesting. One was in two of our cases, an undergraduate student had pursued independent research that independent research as part of a thesis or part of a term paper in a course that actually ended up becoming the collaborative project. So this was something that the undergrad was really interested in. It was their idea originally. And then they ended up working with the faculty member on turning that into kind of more of an academic piece. And then the other piece that we thought was really interesting is we saw two collaborations in our interview sample that were reciprocal. So faculty might have reached out to the undergraduate, but there was no specific project at the beginning. It was just, I would like to do research with you. Let's figure out what we think this project is together and how we can come up with a long-term goal for us to work on together. Paul, are there things you want to add to what I said?
I think I would add that on the third method of recruitment, one of the things that we discovered is that faculty are often not immediately aware of the sort of the time horizon of these undergraduates is very, very different. And that undergraduates' time horizon kind of reset every semester or at least every year. And so beginning to collaborate on something that's long-term, one of the obstacles is the students rarely grasp how long academic projects can take. And the faculty member might be optimistic about how long it's going to take and not grasp either how long it really is going to take. So that third method Julia mentioned was really promising to us, and we heard a lot of really exciting comments in our interviews with both faculty and their former undergraduate collaborators, but it also required kind of greater care and greater forethought in what might happen down the road because of the long-term nature of the collaboration.
Can I just jump in and say this is probably the biggest barrier I have faced? I've worked with a lot of undergrads over the years. There's currently a former undergrad of mine in the audience who we have a paper that we started working on when she was a junior, I think. And it's still, we submitted it at one place, it got rejected, we had to revise it. Now, fortunately, she's a PhD student now, so, we got her. But normally students move on with their lives. And there's another paper that Bettina Wilkinson and I have with one of our other undergrads who's moved on with their life. And we're just at this point, we can't really expect her to continue to contribute because, she's got a job that she has to do. So that's just something that I think you have to either design your project incredibly well so that it's like very much on rails, or you just have to be honest with them and with yourself that, you're along for the ride for a while, and then we're not going to throw you off the paper or anything, but there may come a time when you have to, pay for your rent. So that's fine.
Yeah, I think this might be a good time for me to hop in. So in addition to this article as part of this special issue, a few years ago with my colleagues at USC, we published an article in PS called The Stewardship Model, an Inclusive Approach to Undergraduate Research. And in that piece, and in general in our praxis, we challenge the idea of faculty reaching out to students, especially those who have excelled in their classes, because I think, or even just those who are most talkative or sit at the front or especially gregarious or who are especially ambitious, not because they shouldn't have opportunities, but to really have an open call for applications as a way to make research more accessible to a wide cross-section of our student body. And so, we can do like things like once there's an application, usually I use Google Forms myself, asking students about their academic profile, what classes they've taken, what interests them about politics, what interests them in particular about the research themes that are addressed in our case in our research lab, and then interest in a specific project that has been pitched in the call for applications. And we found that doing this, and this is in an international relations context, that's my subfield in IR, you end up getting a majority of applicants and ultimately a majority of lab members who are women and who are people of color. So when I look at my RAs and when I look at the research assistants that we recruited at USC, so my lab is about a dozen students at USC. My last year before moving to William & Mary, we had about 65, majority women, majority people of color. And that's not how IR looks, but really how IR could look, right? And I think it's because we had this open call that it wasn't just, the super obvious students. And one of the things about our model, and that I've continued over to William & Mary, is that whatever skills you need for research, I will teach you, right? And so in the International Justice Lab, which I direct at William & Mary and is starting its 5th year, we recruit students across academic classes, but I am especially excited when I get to recruit students in their first year. And so they come in, they're all called fellows because there's already enough alphabet soup in human rights and international justice. They come in, they're all fellows, but their first year, they are a research assistant. So they are supporting an existing research project, right? That's kind of the traditional RA relationship. Then, but what's different is then in their second year in the lab, they are upgraded to a collaborator. So the people they came in with in their cohort, I offer, 2-3 ideas that I think are interesting, that I think are feasible for collaboration. They pick one, and then we start, research question. Let's go see what the adjacent literature says, all the way into research design, data collection. And at this point, they get to kind of supervise their newest classmates, right, who are now the research assistants on their project, so on and so forth. So that by their senior year, they're presenting at APSA. So I have a student who's presenting our work tomorrow. And then by the end of that, we submit an article to journals. And in the intervening time, using our research to illuminate issues of the day, writing in popular press outlets like at the Washington Post or Foreign Policy and others. And so we've had great success with that. It means having a smaller group of students. So like 12 is like the biggest I've ever had, but kind of having this commitment to this full trajectory that I think gets students to buy in. And when they're sending a Google form into the void, like they don't have to be intimidated by reaching out to me or like, is she serious? They can just, put an anonymous Google form. And then, then we follow up and do the whole interview process. And I found that that's one way to live out a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you also get students from other disciplines. So students from Hispanic cities, but who've done, research or who've taken classes on memory in Guatemala, or someone from computer science who's excited to use their code into let's use GIS for memory sites and things like that. And I feel like that has enriched my work beyond if I had just been recruiting students in government or in our international relations program.
Can I piggyback on this just quickly? It sounds like we have similar programs and that they're multi-year and thinking about mentorship of senior students and so I try to recruit students who are just finishing their first year so that they join the team as they're entering their sophomore year. Now, I just want to say I would love to do a fully open call, and I tried it once, but at a large public institution, it was just too much. It was too much to sort through. And so the way that I've gotten around this, and I wonder if this might be helpful for other folks at larger institutions, is I don't recruit students who sit at the front of the class and are maybe the most obvious choices. The way that I teach large introductory lecture courses because I love it, and I have a number of factors that I look for in recruiting students who maybe have never considered research as something of interest to them. And they have weekly assignments that they do. There's 13 of them, but I only count 10. And I look for the students who maybe stumbled a little bit at the beginning, but kept at it and improved. Right. And we have background information about everybody. So I know their major, I know their year, I know some information about their first gen status and the way they self-identify. And I recruit a very diverse pool. And I tell them, you know, you and I may have never really spoken before because you didn't attend office hours, but I see a lot of potential that you might be interested in this. And I then invite everybody to like a Zoom meeting to talk about it and answer any questions that they have. And I essentially pitch to them why I think this is good for them, what I can offer them in joining my program, as opposed to thinking about what they can offer me. And I find that that opens doors to folks who maybe never considered that they would want to do that. And so for those who can't really do an open call because it's just insane. And actually I find that at least at Illinois, freshmen are told to seek out research with faculty. And so the ones who will answer that call are actually the ones who are sitting at the front of your classroom sometimes. And so looking for those who aren't sitting at the front of your classroom, but you see that this has the potential to serve them and pitching it in that way can help in thinking about diversifying the group of students that you work with.
That's interesting. I had a question and a couple of comments. One is that so you try to recruit for diversity, but do you find it easy to recruit like ideological diversity? Because you know, like Republicans are always complaining about getting shut out of academia, right? Sure. So, and they're complaining about either this conscious or subtle bias that professors excluding them. And so, do you consciously try to recruit like political diversity as well, or do you think maybe not so much?
I don't have information about the students' ideology, and so it would be very hard for me to target in any way. But okay. I aim to be inclusive on a lot of dimensions. And so I imagine that there is a lot of ideological diversity among my students. I also have a larger team. So I think I think if you're working with 1 or 2 students, it's harder to think about diversifying the team, but I've had upwards of 22 students work with me in a given year. And so I imagine that from their research interests, I can tell that they have a diverse set of perspectives.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to ask because I am the person with a PhD who either gets to grade their work or who is their boss and approves their hours. And so, I mean, 2/3 of our students come from Virginia. William & Mary is a public institution. So it's a purple state. So I'd assume there's like more heterogeneity among our student body than maybe the select group of people who decide to get PhDs in political science and who are their professors. So if I had to guess, I would say we're probably, you know, more left-leaning than the overall student body, and I think that's good. In terms of ideological diversity, though, I think it's a lot of selecting in, because if you want to work on research on human rights, transitional justice, and international law in courts, I don't think it's like, well, are war crimes okay? Discuss, you know, maybe they're coming in to like figure out what the other side's arguments are. But I try to be pretty upfront with my students, and even in my classes that I teach, that, you know, sometimes I'm going to say things that sound political, like there is a torture prohibition, but that precedes me, that goes back to antiquity. And you know, yeah, so do I believe everything in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Absolutely. And this is a course on that, and this is a lab dedicated to those themes. But yeah, I don't, I think in terms of also just for research, like we're trying to do science. And so I think ideology, I mean, if my views were shaping what kind of outcome I wanted to observe, and maybe if I was putting my thumb on the scale for what results I might find, that would be an issue, but that's like just not consistent with my commitment to science. And so I think that would also be maybe interesting or illuminating to them that we're just there to find answers to political questions.
Sure. I think if I was teaching a course in human rights, I might mention that, you know, human rights encompass both civil rights, but also religious freedom. And I think certain code words like religious freedom really attracts a lot of like, you know, conservative Republicans. So just, you know, just these code words to show that all views are welcome.
Yeah.
In the South Korean context, I always try to make a point of being equally criticized, like, you know, like left-wing presidents, right-wing presidents, they all suck, okay? And this is why. So by being an equal critic, you know, it's like encouraging students, you can say whatever you want. You can criticize any side.
That has become increasingly challenging in the American context.
Well, I'm a traditionalist. So I say like only God is perfect, man is not perfect. So, anybody's open to critique. Anyway, that was my question. My comment for the Korean context was that I have a very hard time recruiting and motivating students. Because one, students work really hard to get into prestigious colleges. So once they get into colleges, first they want to drink a lot, okay? And then after they finish drinking, they're thinking about getting a job. And in the South Korean context, because of legal and cultural reasons, they have to focus on their GPA and the SAT. And by SAT, I'm talking about the Samsung aptitude test, which the most Korean students actually take. This is an actual test. And because of legal and cultural reasons, many job applicants, they cannot mention their school name. They cannot, because they think it's unfair. And so it's a very narrow way of selecting job candidates. And so most students who want to stay and work in Korea, they don't have incentive to do any research projects after my class ends. Okay, so that's number one. And number two is that, on the other hand, I never had problems finding undergrads to work with because they contact me. But usually those undergrads are from outer colleges. So I got one from Vanderbilt, another one from University College London. She was one of the co-authors. And so the one from Vanderbilt, he basically emailed every political science professor in Korea. And I was the only one to respond, right? And, because everyone else is very busy helping, grad students, right? They don't have time for undergrads, especially from another university. But I'm kind of like an outsider. I don't have that. I'm not tenure track. I don't have that many grad students. I was okay. So that's been my experience. And so like the undergrad students that I do have in Korea, I think I try to help them with kind of short-term publications, like the Diplomat, like mass media, because again, like academic journals take a really long time. And so they have very short time horizon because they need to study for the SAT, right? So, thank you.
When I tell students why research might be good for them, I focus on the professional skills that they're learning.
Exactly.
Most of my students don't go on to get PhDs. A lot of them go to law school.
Does anybody have most of their students going to get PhDs?
Well, I don't know. I was
That
just
would be
hearing about
crazy.
these experiences about your students.
Yeah, but I have like one student, not 25.
But so I try to tell them, like, even if you don't want to do an academic career, even if you don't want to do research, these skills of like learning about what data are and why and how we test our assumptions about the world in qualitative and quantitative data is really valuable. I tell them, because technically my program is called a research internship, but not only do they get credit for it, but they should put it on their CV. They're learning professionalization skills. If you have a multi-year program like Kelly and I do, they're doing mentoring that they should be, they're figuring out how to give feedback to people. And so I think that is a way to think about recruitment. It's not just students who are very, they are job focused, and in a way they should be job focused, and we can feed into their ambitions and tell them what we can offer them in their training.
Right.
Yeah.
But that works in the US because there's no SAT.
Yeah,
Sure,
right.
yeah.
Yes, of course.
But data literacy is really important. Prospective employers want to see that. Actually, sometimes when my students outside of my lab, but general human rights say, what can I do to prepare one day to work at Amnesty International or to work at the UN development program? And I'm like, go take more statistics, go take data visualization in the data science program. And they're like, this is the wrong answer. And I'm like, no, everyone who wants to do human rights stuff has the same or similar substantive knowledge. What's going to set you apart is the types of products that these organizations increasingly want. They want to see, what is the prevalence of violence against women in different countries, and what interventions are likely to change this, and what empirical evidence have scholars and practitioners found, and can we marshal this to generate public policy? And so I think showing them, telling them upfront that transferable skills that, probably the most applicable would be if they went to pursue a PhD, because they've gotten a full apprenticeship in how to do a research project, which some of us got way later in our professional lives. or I guess in graduate school, but then also public speaking, and distilling, really complex ideas into short, 10-minute APSA presentations or those types of things. I think those are valuable. And wherever there can be small written outputs, I know political violence at a glance is gone, and the monkey cage is gone, but it's coming back as good authority. We're launching in September, but other outlets where shorter form pieces that they can share a byline, and that are legible to employers as well. So my students have like a Washington Post byline, like they don't have to be doing any more research, but to say, as an undergraduate, I published in, this international newspaper.
To jump in as a co-editor of PS, what would that, if let's say counterfactually PS were to start doing stuff like that, yes, what would that look like? Like, how could we make that both interesting to the readership and also useful for this kind of thing? Like, what would a call for papers look like that would be helpful?
A call for papers for short form pieces?
Yeah, because
With undergraduates.
Yeah, basically, like if you need to get short but scholarly pieces published for undergraduates, right? Or with undergraduate collaborators.
One thing that I'm thinking, and it's less about how you format the specific content of the call for proposals, but more, it would be.
Maybe it was only a 40-minute call. Zoom used to have a 40-minute limit. It's not an institutional subscription.
No, I pay a lot of money. There's no 40-minute limit for us. I think it was I saw my internet went dead. The conference center has questionable connectivity. So we're doing the best we can, but please continue your answer.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think a regular call, it would allow you as a faculty sponsoring, like, or wanting to work with undergraduates to be able to kind of predict when that would happen, rather than, I don't think, given all the other commitments that our undergraduate students have, I think it'd be really challenging to kind of turn around an article, even in short form, even if it's supposed to be for not a fully academic audience, in a 2-month respond to a call type approach. So I think that would be important.
Yeah, I think maybe identifying some key areas where PS wants to be leading policy discussions informed by political science research. And so if it's, 2024 and we want to have, want to have some insights into upcoming elections, not quite the full, full length article, but some of these like shorter, snappier pieces, I think that would be welcome. Or just, I think if there was just a possibility, like something happens and like, let's say we're back in February of 2022 and Russia has begun a full country assault on Ukraine, that would be, if I knew that was a venue that I could be submitting something with my students using our research on jurisdiction of various courts over Russian personnel involved in Ukraine, then that would be a place where we would submit equally as we would have at political violence at a glance or mischief of factions, all these different places. So if there's like a standing part of PS online, I think people would be eager to do that.
Right. I had a
I had
question.
a thought on this. This comment about PS having a regular opportunity makes me think about the supply of such opportunities. So these comments earlier about funding and around how do you select the right people, one of the assumptions here, appropriate assumptions, is that there's only a narrow number of such opportunities. And so given that there's such enthusiasm for faculty student collaboration, certainly among everybody on this call, I think, in addition to sort of choosing right, doing it right, how do you prioritize different values, you want to increase the supply of such opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities for research that's been mentored by faculty, student research mentored by faculty, but a very narrow number of opportunities for co-authored faculty student work. And I think some of the comments here in different contexts, the US and Korea, are about how do you get it to count toward a job, count toward graduation, count toward your wallet. And so thinking about how we can have some intermediate category where it's the faculty member is counting in their labor, the student is counting whether it's for money or prestige or learning or all three in some balance. So there's more of these opportunities. I have a colleague in sociology who does fairly regularly do kind of a whole class is doing research with him. It's collaborative faculty student research, but it's a 4-credit class and it's embedded in methods and learning methods of survey research and sort of action research around what the campus needs. But those kinds of opportunities strike me as pretty rare. And so this PS idea of a regular section strikes me as a creative thought about how to increase the supply of opportunities so there's more places for this kind of collaborative scholarship to go and be published.
I was wondering, can we make it kind of like a preprint style online? So everybody gets published as a preprint, and then the editors or some kind of like, so everybody would be published as a preprint, and everybody gets kind of maybe like peer reviews from other people. And then the editors can select like the winners, like the best papers, like these are the model, like student papers. Because I think from my students' perspective, like they don't want to publish, they don't want to submit because they think, oh, the chances of getting published is so low. But if everyone gets published at least as a preprint, then they have a, they have an internet citation they can include in their CV, right? And also opportunity to get feedback, from other students, from other scholars. Could that be an option? So
I mean, certainly something that we could discuss.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to commit to anything right now.
Right.
But okay, so my initial thoughts are, there are preprint archives already set up, like SSRN.
Sure, but sponsored by PS on a certain topic. For example, you mentioned like the 2024 election, so like on a topical theme. Because the other preprints, it's just any topic, right? But we can do like a specific theme, like the election or human rights or something else. And so maybe like every semester we can do a different theme and give students like maybe like that, or we can let students know maybe like a year in advance, right? That we have a special call for papers on this specific topic.
I feel like to like not reinvent the wheel though. So there are already like formats or outlets for undergraduate research. I think what would be different here or where the would be like faculty student, right? Short form publications.
Right,
Yeah.
because there's these undergraduate research journals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And somehow,
And you want to have some like quality control like
Right,
that. Like you
right.
still want you want political scientists, we love our students, but also if we're going to PS, maybe we're not trying to read our students' work, but are trying to see how our colleagues and students are producing. And I think what type and level of work people are producing. So people have been kind of surprised, like you publish with your undergrads, and I'm like, yeah, like does this shape what journals you submit to? And I'm like, no, I submit to the same journals that I submit to. And so I think this is one, real draw of this special issue, and why I'm really glad to be part of it. I'm glad that you all spearheaded this, is showing what different folks are doing and showing what is possible with undergraduates that, in contexts like mine, where we don't have graduate students, right? We're working primarily with undergraduates, or even in places where there's grads and undergrads, that the tremendous value that they can bring, and also the tremendous value that we can provide has been really, really cool.
Right, so I agree with all that, but I'm wondering like, because for students, we're just gonna do maybe like a one-shot thing. And so I'm wondering if all faculty student collaborations can be posted somewhere, in all the ones that submit.
I feel pretty confident that they can be posted somewhere.
Okay.
I also feel pretty confident that PS is 100% committed to publishing only peer-reviewed work.
Exactly, right.
So there may be a way to fulfill both of those goals.
In the spirit of, I think, Paul's comment about it, like making more opportunities for collaboration between undergraduates and faculty with research, what if part of the short form article also had, even if just a paragraph on how this happened? So was it that the student wrote a paper and it inspired the faculty member to say, hey, we should work on this together? Or was it more of like an apprenticeship where you're like, here's my idea and I invited the student to join me, like a process is part of it. And so we think about how we create models that other people can think about, so that if I tell undergraduates like, oh, look at this section of PS to see how other undergraduates got involved in research, they might find their own way into the stream. Maybe it could be an interesting thing. But in terms of the timing, you want to have peer review, but it has to be fast. What if it's like you have a committee of people who peer review for the undergrad research and almost like a set of associate editors, but all they do is that section?
I mean, we have an editorial board who we call on for such things, and also.
But this might require a separate group that knows that they have to be able to move fast, and maybe you
Right.
find one outside person very much in the area. Of,
Well,
for
for short pieces like this, like, I mean, because I'm thinking based on Kelly's original statement, we're talking about something, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words. Even ordinary reviewers will turn that around
Quickly.
pretty fast for
Yeah.
us. So I'm not actually, the problem is not that, the problem is getting them to agree.
Great, right.
And the editorial board, I mean, that's the exchange,
That's
right?
right.
You have to not say no to us every time we
You're on
ask
the
you to
board.
no.
But also we have to not abuse our editorial board as
Yeah.
well, because
And that's
sometimes we
what I'm
really
thinking.
need them,
Yeah.
right, in certain key situations.
And you might think, like, I do agree that it should be peer reviewed and it should be rigorous, but something that I work with my students a lot, whether I'm now teaching the senior honors thesis seminar, is saying, you're making a contribution and it is a novel thing and it is your voice, it is what you are bringing to the table, but it does not have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be everything because of the time frame, because of their limited resources. And so I wonder too, if we say that, like, what I tell them to do is I say, innovate on theory or data or methods. Do not try to innovate on all three. Whereas I would not tell my graduate students not to innovate across the board. And so I think we might say, like, offers a novel theory, a novel, like, instead of across the board, kind of not lowering the standard, but narrowing the scope of what we expect.
Well, that's why I asked about the call, because we do have different calls that ask for different things. They all require original research, right? But sometimes they are a little different in what sort of original research they are specifying. So if we can say, okay, this is a section for faculty-student collaborations, here are the basic parameters, right? It might be shorter than a typical submission would be. It might, it always has to be original research, but it might not have to, be a brand new theory and a brand new empirical methodology and a brand new data set, right? That I think is much more manageable.
But this sounds like two things to me now, actually. So I'm hearing like a section of PS, like the teacher, the profession, et cetera, but that is specifically faculty student collaboration. That sounds like one thing where it's actual research versus these short firms, something is happening in the world. And we have researchers in our profession whose expertise, in whose area of expertise this is, and they are going to translate their research findings to a broader audience. So those seem like kind of like two things to me. And I like both of those things.
But it is important to recognize they're different.
Yeah.
They're very different. I also think, we've just really taken the helm here at the journal, and we're really, really committed to a few principles. One is peer review. One is that it's empirical research that we're getting. And the other is to really take seriously what we do. Like, you're not going to find another journal out there that really cares about research on pedagogy and political science.
Right.
I mean, we're reinforcing that, right? So as we up our empirical game, we're not going to say, oh, well, teaching's not important. No, au contraire. We're going to say that this is central to what we do as political scientists. So I do think there's room for debate on what sorts of structures we might take to do this. But I do feel like there are more emerging outlets for this quick take of what my research says on what happens in Ukraine, like the monkey cage when it comes back, hopefully, right? Outlets like that. But I don't see an outlet at all for research, collaborative research between undergraduates and professors. So I think that's something that, we're in the process of innovating right now in every one of our editorial meetings in terms of what we do different. And if you look at PS closely, you're going to see that there's a lot different going on right now.
Yeah, but this idea of a note, where like it's almost like a research note. So are you one thing on
One
that you're innovating
thing, but
on?
again, that maybe offers a little bit, are encouraged to do short narrative of how this came about, again, to create models for other people to adopt if they want to think about how.
Yeah, that's what this whole special issue is about. Like,
Exactly.
oh, look at what all your colleagues are doing in this area and how they're doing it differently, right?
Right.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
So what's the ideal number of submissions for something like this? Like you want like 1,000 submissions?
I never want to say we want fewer submissions. We want as many submissions of good work as we can get.
Right.
I don't think we would need that many to be successful.
Right.
I think if we got, I'm going to pull a number out of thin air. If we got 75 submissions a year in this section, I would count that as a very, very good success.
Yeah.
We wouldn't publish 75, of course, because not all would
Right.
make it through peer review, but I think that would be actually amazing.
Got Paul with his hand up again.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
I mean, a thought. I mean, if PS is up for doing all this, great. But this sounds like a kind of a big ask, a big lift. I mean, an intermediate step might just be outreach to faculty saying, here's the next PS call for everybody. And have you considered submitting something that you would work on with your undergraduates? Just the explicit invitation. I mean, I don't think I've ever once read a PS call and just sort of immediately thought, I wonder if they're looking for collaborative submissions from faculty and undergraduates. I might have, so even just the existing calls, because I'm not sure all the faculty undergraduate collaboration needs to be in one place. Why not, have it be intermingled with all the other scholarship that's not co-authored by undergraduates? Anyway, that's one thought. The other thing is, the third prompt that Peter sent us about how to handle the shorter time horizons. This strikes me as a great help, a great tool for that, because we've got a specific deadline. It's for a special issue. This helps kind of move things along in a time frame that maybe is more amenable to undergraduate participation, rather than a more open-ended, perhaps larger, more ambitious project that might be sort of at odds with the shorter time horizons for undergraduate research.
You could think about the timing also to fit with the academic calendar. So you could say it has to be submitted by this date during the first semester or first quarter. We will give you an answer before the start of the next semester, so the fast turnaround, so that the final thing is submitted before the end of the academic year. So you almost have like a academic year cycle for submission, review, and resubmission.
And that is an important part of the rationale for why it ought to be a distinct section,
Yeah.
because that is one of the challenges I found is that, undergrads, they need it to go pretty fast, which means shorter, probably. It means not quite as comprehensive. And so there would be more of a logic to like, okay, let's create a kind of submission that is serious. It's not a waste of our readers' time, but it's also tailored.
And rather than rolling submission, again, if everybody's coming in the fall, late fall, again, a committee can review all of the submissions. And that you just know, if you sign up for this official committee, that you're gonna have a lot of work over the winter break to review everything and get the reviews back in time for the start of the next semester or the next quarter.
Right. We have over 6,000 members in APSA. So if you're using this as a tool to encourage faculty-student collaborations, would the end goal be to encourage at least 1,000 submissions a year?
Oh, geez. I mean,
Okay.
how many submissions does APSR get?
None.
Like a 4,000 maybe? And I remember thinking that's a ton. If we got a quarter of that just in these, I mean, I guess I'd be happy, but I'd be really surprised.
Right, but shouldn't that be our end goal? Because if you're using this as a tool to encourage faculty-student collaboration, nationwide or internationally, instead of just a small select number.
Well, in the same way that NASA's goal should be to colonize the stars.
Okay.
But we're not going to set that as goal one.
Also, I think we have to be realistic about our discipline, right?
Yeah.
And the people here care about this, but look,
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I think the norm in our profession often is to say, well, I don't have time to do that. I mean, Justin and I are in a place that has no graduate students, right? We have time to do this. We both have done research.
And we get rewarded for doing it.
And we get rewarded for doing it. Our institution wants us to do it. But there's many people in our institutions that get absolutely no reward for this. And usually the research that I've done with my undergraduates has been a pleasure to me, right? It's been good. I've learned from them, right? But for many people, they simply don't want to bother with this, right? So I don't think we can get anywhere near 1,000 submissions. I do think we can provide some we could provide a unique sort of outlet for those folks who are doing it, where it might be a little bit harder, because we do recognize the limited time constraints. We do recognize the constraints of training the students. So I don't think we need to colonize the stars. I mean, I think we need to do just an orbit first and see. Yeah.
Oh, well, hold on. I
Oh,
want to.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Sarah
Yeah.
had- Sarah had- yeah.
Disappearing, so I think she's got an unstable connection.
Interrupt
Okay.
me when she
When
comes back.
Sarah comes back,
Just
we'll-
like, yeah, that's totally
Okay.
fine. There were two things that I'm thinking
I
about.
am here.
Oh.
I was just going, I'm sorry, I have stuff going on in the background, but I was just going to say, I like the idea of having a system that sort of fits with the undergrad academic year, but I also think that this could be a valuable outlet for people who have just graduated with an honors thesis. And that sort of raises this question about timeline and whether you have to be a current undergrad to submit and all of these things. And I know that that's kind of like in the weeds, but just wanted to raise that the moment we go down this road, there's all of these other considerations that need to be addressed.
I was gonna say on this kind of colonizing the stars piece, I was thinking of the space in PS to publish less as being useful as incentivizing faculty to do this and more as being useful to helping undergrads see what, like giving them a very clear deadline, benefit, like understanding of what this process is and kind of where they're headed. And so I think that kind of helps us think about this numbers piece. But the other piece is, and this came up in what Paul and I wrote, is that some models of involving undergraduates in research might result in lots of undergrads participating and or lots of publications, but some models are intensive. Paul and I worked together for like 5 years on one project and it resulted in one peer-reviewed publication. So like, that's not going to be a model where you're going to get 1,000 submissions in a year. So I think there's also kind of this question of we want to make sure we're thinking about incentivizing all different ways of involving undergrads, and some of those will just result in different products.
I do want to add too, like, yes, there are a lot of people that like us who care about this and others who don't, but also this is changing substantially. So even just to like plug for the issue further, like we have folks at liberal arts colleges, people at R2s like William and Mary, people at R1s who are showing us how they are involving undergraduates in research for purposes of research, for purposes of teaching, for purposes of mentoring. So I do think the field and the profession is changing in this respect, especially as more people see that, at least for those who wouldn't care, so like maybe like prototypical R1, like I'm here to publish as many things as possible and I'm going to invest in grad students because that's more likely to provide a return on the investment. When they see, you know, people publishing with undergraduates in those same spaces, right? I think that's one way to get people that's like one method of like evangelizing, right? So it's not just like, you know, do it for purposes of working with students and for, you know, to set them up for like career success, which is one of my motivations, right? But it's like, even if you just want to accelerate your publication pipeline and you want to have more units when you come up for promotion or annual review or tenure, what have you, here is a mechanism, right? And so I think that's one of the great values of this special issue, is showing how people at different institutions are doing this and achieving success and are getting credit in their institutional context, depending on how they pitch and frame their work with students.
I actually want to, this was not on our list of questions, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately because I've been talking with my undergraduate collaborators about it. When I graduated from graduate school in 2008, I had 3 publications. I think maybe two publications and an R&R, something like that. And I was a pretty strong, I believe, candidate for a job. Now there are people applying to graduate school with that much. And there are people who are applying for jobs with what I would consider to be close to a tenure case. Maybe not anymore, God only knows. And I was sort of joking with my undergrad collaborators that, there's going to come a time when, if this just keeps going in this way, that we're like, oh, well, you want to get into Wake Forest, huh? Well, how many peer-reviewed publications do you have? And are we part of the problem? Like, I don't know.
Then the kindergarten honors thesis will start.
Yeah.
And it'll just keep going.
Yeah, like, this was a pretty good preschool, but was it publishable? I mean, I too am partly doing this to help my undergraduates get an edge, but I understand that, like, this is kind of contributing to a culture where, I don't know, of publish, not just publish or perish, but publish, whatever, right? Publish as much as you can, as fast as you can, as soon as you can. And I wonder if how we should think about that potential problem in the context of encouraging students to become more active in research.
So that, I mean, I'll say that co-authoring with my students has never been the goal. It has been something that's offered. I think about the skills that they are learning as the goal. And just like I tell the students in the thesis class I'm teaching now, you'll put forward a hypothesis, we will figure out a way to test it, and you may be wrong, and it will still be a successful process. And so I think having the opportunity to consider publishing with undergraduates is important. I think an outlet supporting that is very valuable. It's also, if it's like evangelical, like a little evangelical of that you should consider this and this is how we did it. But I don't think it should be the goal. I mean, for reasons you put forward, but also because I think that most of what is empowering about learning about research through doing it and through, is the process itself and not always the end result. Because Lord knows how much failure we all have to confront. I think that also that is an important thing that we teach students by inviting them to do research with us. Is that it's not always about the perfect end result. It's about the process and what you learn about yourself and about the world through it. So I think we should keep that in mind, as we think about what it means to grow this as a part of our profession, involving students with research, is that involvement in the process is valuable, I think, in and of itself without a product at the end of it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree.
Lisa's got her hand up.
Sure, I can go after.
Lisa, go ahead.
Thanks. I was wondering if there would be a moment for me to chime in with this perhaps contrarian and I don't know, maybe even like downer perspective. I hope it's not a downer. So I'm a little bit dubious of having like publication as a goal and incentivizing it really aggressively because so not to get too kind of like philosophical about it, but like the truth doesn't get any easier to discover because you're an undergraduate. And I worry about the implicit or perhaps explicit message that we send by creating an outlet at a journal with a different time scale, perhaps with different peer review standards. I wonder what that teaches students about science and about truth seeking. And so when I teach empirical research methods, and I'm like constantly ambivalent about this approach, but it's the one that feels really authentic to me. I tend to emphasize like awe in scientific discovery. And really, I mean, first to introduce many unsuspecting students to the concept of political science as a scientific enterprise. Students who might, and this is actually what my article is about. So students who might have selected themselves out of STEM in high school because they thought it wasn't for them. Maybe people told them it wasn't for them. Maybe just the standard fare science courses in high school didn't allow them to answer questions that substantively interested them because we don't, as a general rule, provide a scientific framework for high school students to answer questions about politics and society. And so to get them into my class, students who have chosen to take political science and now are forced to take a research methods class are wondering like, oh, I thought I was just going to kind of read stories about, how politics went down in some places and then go to law school. And for them to realize that political science has a kinship with all of the other sciences, right? Like, and we talk about the unity of knowledge and just what a huge deal it is to do science and to generate truths that no one knew before. That is a really enormous undertaking and one that still awes me. And so I would not personally be like really keen to like contradict that message by saying that within the space of a few months, you can cross the finish line scientifically. I would feel dishonest doing it. Now, I don't want to be like a total Debbie Downer and say that like there isn't some like additional like utility in having some kind of product, right? Like, you know, even the most like self-important philosophical scientists need to feel like they're making progress. Like we need to have like motivation. And that's why I have loved like publishing short explainers in the monkey cage. It's like, oh, I did a thing, right? But I view that as very separate from basic science. And I think someone said that before, and like I totally agree. So I'm not like poo-pooing the whole idea. I just kind of want to like be maybe, I don't know, just kind of like a little contrarian, just to kind of spark a dialogue about like the philosophy behind like what we're doing here. Thanks.
Thank you for that. That's really something that we need to think seriously about. I did promise the audience that we would have some time for questions.
Sarah has her hand up. Do you want to?
Okay.
Sorry.
I know, Kelly, you had something
No,
you wanted
Sarah.
to say.
I was
Okay.
pointing to.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
mean, the
just
other
one
thing.
final comment, then we want to open it up because some people have been patient. There's a virtual audience out there.
Lisa, I really appreciated your perspective. The other thing that I would raise as a concern is we've talked about the equity issues and the issues about.
Oh no,
I think it's us.
It's us, yeah.
is it frozen?
Oh, yeah, because they're all frozen.
Yeah,
So
it's us.
It's us, yeah. Yeah, whoops.
Nothing
Yeah.
good, no.
Dang.
While we're waiting though, I would say, so like one of the reasons why publishing has been items has been the goal is because I'm a junior faculty member.
Yeah.
So like, let's not like, so I started a lab and I'm doing all this teaching. What types of end results we pursue. So at some point I'll just be like, you know, let's just like, let's have like a 18th century style French salon where we just like think great thoughts. But right now the great thoughts have to result in a unit to stay employed.
We're gonna post this on the YouTube.
Sarah,
Yeah, I think so.
the internet went berserk again, so
Right.
you can go ahead and restart your comment. I'm sorry.
Sure. I was just saying, I think that we still have a fundamental issue with the fact that certain students from probably more privileged backgrounds are still going to find themselves more likely to find like see their name in print in an undergraduate research publication. And so I think that that's just a reality that we need to like continue to like have a drumbeat for to understand that we as faculty have a responsibility to think more expansively about who we're providing those opportunities to. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that I do think that undergraduates from certain backgrounds can move this idea of a publication to the finish line without pay. And some undergraduates don't have the privilege of being able to do that. And so I think that we have an opportunity to think about how we want to make sure that students who maybe don't have the privilege of working unpaid to get their names in print, what are this returns to our original conversation about funding, but it's important for us to think about the fact that some students aren't going to be able to like see this process through if they have to work a job as they're in undergrad, they're taking their classes.
Thank you, Sarah. Can we now turn the discussion over to the promised Q&A? Just hear from our expansive public here who's present or anybody who's joining us virtually.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, happy. This has been good. Yeah. I'm Cameron Tilley. I'm a PhD candidate at Duke University. And I was wondering, particularly when you're talking about the 4-year programs, what are the kind of opportunities for students to enter later in? So a little background on my kind of experience with 2 research programs. I had gone through one when I was in my undergrad in Sydney, and I was in the admissions office there later and pushed them to start one for a junior fellowship. So it was originally, then they changed that. The administration decided to change things incorrectly, in my opinion. We were recruiting people in the summer beforehand. I'd be like, here's this study of political economy, kind of what is getting us in, starting to just kind of reading groups, the more salon style, and they'll be able to pick up students later for more like formal research. So kind of what have y'all dealt with getting people later in the process?
So my article that's appearing, or that's in First View and will be out with the issue, is about what I call like a student-centered expanded approach to undergraduate research, which my program is a 4-semester, 2-year program that layers skills and what is research, and then how to do it, how to figure out what you want to do, and then how to actually execute your own research while learning through doing by assisting me on a team research project, right? So I think learning by doing is very important. I say for their own sake that the ideal time to start that 2-year program, if they think they want to do the whole thing, is at the beginning of their sophomore year. Because by the end of their junior year, they have developed one full research project of their own interest that leads very nicely into a senior thesis where they will work more independently with an advisor. But students do join me in their junior year, and then in their second year in the program, I support them with their thesis project. And so I think it's just recognizing like, what is their end goal and how can we get those skills layered a little bit more quickly so that they are in a good position to succeed. So if people are joining a little bit later on, my particular program, I think, is not suited for people in their last year of college. There's not enough time. I think learning how to do research takes a long time. And so I don't want to rush them through the process because I don't think I can deliver on the promises of what I'm saying that I can offer them in terms of skill development. So I don't accept rising seniors into my program, which is why I try to target as many people early in the process. There are other courses that they can take that will be more condensed, but I think it's important to say, know when the ideal time to start, know when the maximum latest point that people can start. And again, don't overpromise what you don't think you can deliver within the time frame. If that's very generic advice, but
yeah, I describe at like the first lab meeting in the year, like the ideal trajectory of a student in the lab, and that really is it benefits students who come in as first years or like as second years. I just graduated in May. The first group who started as first years when I started at William & Mary's. And so it took the whole 4 years to support an existing project, to become collaborators on a project, to actually do that research. They presented at last year's APSA, and before this year's APSA, our article was accepted at a peer-reviewed journal. And so like showing students like how long that takes. And I think it shows, I think it's clear for students who are joining as juniors or as seniors, because some of them just want a research experience in your substantive area. They're like, I'm going to be applying for jobs at Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch or, the Democracy Foundation or Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And this is going to like look good for me. So I know that I'm a senior. I know that I'm not going to get the like ideal trajectory, but like I still want this like mentored research experience with you. So I think everyone communicate. It's important to communicate the maximum possible. Now, if it's had to go to graduate school, that's great. Then we can keep collaborating in that respect. But I'm not gonna like force a paper on them and make them like stay on forever. But then also like the extent of face time that I can give them post graduation is much reduced from what I can give them, while they are still a student, taking classes with us, coming to like weekly lab meetings and all of that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody with their hand up, Justin?
Yes, there are 2 questions in the Q&A box. No, it's actually just one question twice. We had a question from Bettina Wilkinson. In light of the time constraints that faculty have today, how do we incentivize more faculty to work with students on research projects? One incentive is to count a co-authored publication with an undergraduate as a single author publication, but what else can be done?
I have two thoughts on this. So Julie and I talked to faculty at a variety of institutions. And aside from the things that I think we might come up with quickly in answer to Bettina's question that kind of fall in the category of compensation, another category of incentives was kind of the environment, how normalized it was, how common it was, how recognized it was. So Macalester College, where Lisa Mueller and I teach, Haverford College, their political science department, these are two places that faculty undergraduate collaboration is widespread in the department. So it's very normal. And at least on our campus, campus-wide, it's something that gets a lot of attention. It's in the daily email blast to the campus, like it's praised, it's recognized. And so I do think, in addition to these other important mechanisms that I would categorize as forms of compensation or work release, just the simple, honoring it, recognizing it, publicizing it, making it a more common norm. It takes time to get there, but I think that's a really vital strategy as well.
I mean, I emphasize this especially now with things like MTurk coming increasingly under fire for the quality that you can expect out of human coders. It's very important, I'm going to say this right now, it's very important to treat your students as students and not as free labor, right? So that is really important, and which is why I really emphasize a curricular component to the research internship program. But what you're getting there is very high quality human coding work. And it's usually the kind of stuff that we as faculty feel that we have to do ourselves. And it is the most time consuming. And so I really emphasize that if you train your students and why they're doing this and why it's important, and they understand the context of what they're doing, what they produce is incredibly valuable human coding work. And if they spend more than a semester in your program, they develop expertise and they do a great job in training the next cohort of coders. And so, I think I do a lot of computational social science, but most of the output is crap if the input isn't good. And so I really focus on that, but always with the preface of this is not free labor. These are students who you are mentoring and training. They get things out of this, but I think our research does too. And even if it doesn't end up in a publication, it makes me a better scholar because I think the data sets that I produce are of higher quality because of the careful work that they're doing. I mean, they take a lot of pride in it. And so that is to me an important selling point for those of us who do not just quantitative work, qualitative work as well, coding, content analysis.
Sure. So personally, my motivation is, I think just, student research is just part of good teaching, right? Absolutely. And then ideally, I want at least five of my students to submit to PS every year, well, not the same 5 students, but, every year I have 5 students, and probably, maybe most or all will be rejected from publication, but I want them to at least get opportunity for peer review and to post in some kind of public forum.
There's no more authentic experience than getting rejected.
Exactly. After peer review.
That is the actual job, and for them to see that and to see how the sausage is made and to see how mistakes can be costly, and if they see that the stakes are high, like the amount of pride in that, like if you train them well and you believe in them, they will walk through fire for you, so. Right. Yeah.
And so I want them to get, peer review, explain exactly like, this was good, this needs improvement. Okay. So like, so this is like international standards.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so the rest of my students will see like, so they learn from the 5, right? And so there would be my end goal. I want at least 5 students every year submitting to PS, and then they learn from their experience and they share it with their peers. Right. Okay.
It was just on this thing because I'm currently teaching the kind of first year research writing course. And I suspect this is a similar phenomenon in other places, that I'm basically the only social scientist in that group. Everything else is pretty much English and humanities, so it's a lot of like very personal narrative, that kind of thing. So it might be worth people with graduate students trying to look, getting teaching experiences can be hard depending on where you are. I encourage them to do those kind of courses to kind of change a little bit of that balance, because it seems like first week the students were kind of itching for some of that and they didn't want to do the creative writing kind of thing. So that might be another good avenue of getting good for graduate students and good for them other undergrad students realizing like, oh, this is like a real thing and what this looks like early on.
Great. And it benefits us later, right? Like if we, how do you write a social science question, right? Like not a how question, but an under what circumstances and what, yeah.
I gave them a very confusing paper on institutions. I was like, what the word rule means is a lot more complicated than you guys think.
Yeah.
Well, anybody have any final reflections, commentary before we?
Thank you for issuing this call and
Yeah.
bringing us together.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
I was just gonna say, thank you to all of you so very much for your contributions, both to the journal and today. This will be online for you to, reference your colleagues as a resource for thinking about research with undergraduates. And we just really hope that this call also will make all of you partners with us and to continue to contribute to the journal, both with your work, because we're honored to be able to publish your work, but also with your ideas and your engagement as we move forward. And many of the ideas that we talked about today, we will discuss in our editorial meeting and think about some of what you've shared with us. So thank you very much. I think we need to give you all the